James Kaufman, World News Report today. Today is February 7th, 2023, 1 p.m. Central here in the U.S. God bless you and yours, no matter where you are in the world. Please subscribe, give us a thumbs up, ring that bell for critical future updates. Ladies and gentlemen, we've just had a very large explosion, i.e. a solar flare and associated coronal mass ejection on the limb of our star coming around. This comes from a yet unnamed sunspot, but it was a very large explosion, as you can see here, and actually caused an M1 solar flare here on Earth, although not Earth-facing. What just exploded on the far side of the sun? That's a great question. Huge plumes of plasma flew over the sun's southeastern limb on February 7th, likely heralding the approach of an active sunspot. The eruption pictured here produced an M1 class solar flare and a low-frequency radio blackout over the South Atlantic Ocean. Ham radio operators and mariners may have noticed unusual propagation effects below 15 megahertz for as much as an hour after 13:55 UTC time when the explosion occurred. Overnight, the sun has just woken up. It is unbelievable. This is the M1 flare that we've had here, and you can see the baseline has moved way up. A long-term flare that definitely emitted a CME or coronal mass ejection that probably won't have much of an Earth component to it, although the X-rays and electrons sure hit our GOES X-ray flux and our GOES satellite. Along with the large M1 explosion and coronal mass ejection, it appears that the sunspots have doubled in size and complexity over the last 24 hours. This movie from NASA's Solar Dynamic Observatory shows the profusion of the new dark cores. One of the new sunspots that has actually been named here, AR 3213, has an unstable beta-gamma magnetic field that harbors energy for a large solar flare. It seems almost directly facing Earth currently. And what are we seeing? We're seeing the red sunspot group that we talked about. Luckily, it did break apart into several pieces, as it was one of the largest sunspot areas ever seen on the backside of the sun. We do have this other huge orange sunspot also coming around from the backside. It's a backside composite. Now, please remember, we've moved up from a B++ baseline to a very high baseline, C+, over just the last 24 hours. And this right here is going to be our M flare that occurred mostly over the Atlantic Ocean and parts of South America and maybe parts of even Africa. A very large solar flare, and of course these X-rays did hit Earth and they did hit our GOES satellite. Look at the radio attenuation. It looks like it is actually stronger than 20 decimals. So it wasn't an extremely strong flare, but it wasn't even around the limb yet. If that sunspot continues this activity while Earth-facing, it will be lights out. In the meantime, the KP index that NASA and NOAA use show 9 hours of geomagnetic disturbance, and the College KP index shows a KP6 for 3 hours, with an additional 9 hours of KP4 or geomagnetic disturbance. So we do have space weather hitting us currently. We'll take a look at exactly what that looks like. But before we do that, let's see how many sunspots we have all of a sudden. Remember, I actually said something late yesterday when we did our solar weather update that they should have named some of these sunspots already. Well, now they have named them. This was taken at 7 a.m. this morning. These sunspots have actually become more complex since then. We have 3212, 3211, 3210, 3207, 3209, 3213 just named, 3214 just named, 3215 just named, and 3216 just named. Get ready for a very, very hectic week on our star. We also have additional strong sunspots coming around the southern hemisphere here, as we know, all part of, at one time, the same sunspot group. All right, over to Discover Real-Time Solar Wind. This is actually, again, something I've never seen before. Let's start with plasma. Plasma started the day out at about 13. Missing data, but before that we went to 2, back up to 13 here, constantly in space weather, well, territory, which is anything over 10 centimeters cubed. We have a crossover here. It's because of the solar wind pop. We do see some inverse relationships to solar wind and plasma, like we're used to seeing when, as you can see, when solar winds pop up, plasma is pushed down. When plasma is high, solar winds are pushed down. We actually had some very strange movement here from 12 or 13 all the way down to 0.2 and up and down, up and down. What could have possibly caused this? Here we are at 6. Here we are at 0.29. Here we are at 6. Here we are at 0.6. Then we jump up back over space weather threshold of 10 centimeters cubed, and then we jump back down to 0.24. Then we jump back over again the space weather threshold at 11, only to lose that and jump, well, let's see if we can get that. Well, jump to 4, pop back up to 11, pop back down to 2, and continue the day off. Very few crossovers, except for associated with pops and solar wind. When you have a pop in solar wind from 495 to 604, we're talking about a 250,000 mile per hour difference. Solar winds used to move much, much smoother instead of popping up and down. There's no real reason that this is occurring that I can think of. We pop back down to 494, and then pop right back up to 585. The whole thing's strange, and you can see the crossovers up here when we do it again. Here we are at 493, and we pop up to 589, another 250,000 miles per hour faster in solar winds, another crossover. This continues. This continues. It pops up to 584, back down to close to 400 or 500, up to 584, back down to 490. Very, very strange. Probably the strangest day in solar winds and plasma we've seen in some time, although we've been seeing these same type of patterns for about a month now. And look at the temperature here, actually confirming everything we see with solar winds and plasma. This is beyond scary, whatever's going on. So again, we are in a geomagnetic disturbance and or storm, depending on which KP index you look at. God bless you and yours. Share and subscribe, and always remember that anything is possible in Bizarro World.